The contractions tore through Alara like a storm, but as she checked the fetal monitor with an expert eye, she realized the silence from her husband was far more dangerous than her medical vitals. She gripped the edge of the worn sofa in her small Boston apartment, breathing through the wave of pain that radiated down her spine. 6 minutes apart. She didn't need a doctor to tell her that labor was advancing rapidly. Her own medical training screamed that she needed to get to the hospital now. Outside, the wind howled against the thin window panes, carrying the brunt of a relentless Christmas Eve blizzard. Alara reached for her phone. The screen cracked in the corner, a deliberate choice to maintain her disguise as a struggling wife. She dialed James again. For the 5th time in an hour, it went straight to voicemail. "James, please," she whispered into the empty room, her voice trembling not from cold, but from fear. "It's time." Desperate, she scrolled to the contact labeled mother-in-law. Eleanor Wellington answered on the second ring, the background noise of clinking crystal and soft jazz filtering through the line. "Alara?" Eleanor's voice was sharp, devoid of warmth. "We are in the middle of the Christmas Eve gala. What could possibly be so urgent?" "I'm in labor, Eleanor," Alara gasped, clutching her stomach as another contraction hit. "James isn't answering. I need a ride to the hospital. The roads are—" "Oh, for heaven's sake," Eleanor sighed, the sound dripping with aristocratic annoyance. "Don't be dramatic, dear. It's just a bit of snow. Besides, James is busy handling important family matters. He can't be disturbed by your hysteria." There was a pause, and then the tone turned icier. "You people are used to hardship, aren't you? I'm sure you can manage a simple taxi ride. Don't ruin our evening." The line went dead. Alara stared at the phone, the humiliation stinging worse than the physical pain. "You people." The phrase hung in the freezing air. She grabbed her coat and stumbled out into the hallway. The snow was blinding as she stepped onto the curb, waving frantically. A yellow cab, its wheels crunching through the slush, slowed to a halt. The driver, an older man with kind eyes, rushed out immediately when he saw her state. "Easy now, ma'am," he said, guiding her into the warm back seat with a gentleness her own family had never shown her. "I've got you. We'll get you there safe." Boston General Hospital was a fortress of light against the storm. The lobby was decorated with festive wreaths, and Alara watched as a young couple walked in ahead of her, the husband supporting his wife with anxious adoration. At the reception desk, the nurse looked up, her pen hovering over the admission form. "Name? And is the father parking the car?" Alara felt the weight of the entire year, the hidden insults, the lonely dinners, the disguise she wore to find a love that apparently didn't exist. She placed a hand on her belly, drawing strength from the life inside her. "Alara Vance," she said softly. "And no, it's just me." The nurse's eyes softened with pity, a look Alara hated, but she nodded and signaled for a wheelchair. As the orderly began to wheel her toward the delivery ward, Alara's phone buzzed in her lap. Her heart leaped. Maybe James was coming. Maybe he cared. She unlocked the screen, her thumb hovering over the message notification. Just as they wheeled her into the delivery room, a text from James lit up her phone. "Don't ruin tonight. Stay quiet," followed by a photo accidentally sent, a champagne toast with a woman's manicured hand. Can you believe James sent that text while his wife is fighting through labor alone? If you are standing with Alara right now and find this behavior unacceptable, please comment the number 9 below to let me know you're watching. And if you haven't already, I warmly invite you to subscribe to the Black King channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss a moment of justice. Your support truly helps us continue sharing these powerful stories. Now, let's find out exactly whose manicured hand was holding that champagne. Between the agonizing pushes, Alara's mind drifted back to the very first time she sat at the Wellington dining table and felt the sharp knife of their prejudice. The image of that manicured hand from James's text burned in her retinas, dragging her memory back to a year ago, to the owner of those perfect, cruel fingers, Sarah. It was a Thanksgiving dinner at the Wellington estate, a place that smelled of old mahogany and disapproval. Alara had worn her best dress, a simple navy sheath, and left her natural curls loose, proud of who she was. But the moment Eleanor opened the massive oak door, her gaze didn't meet Alara's eyes. It stopped at her hair. "Oh," Eleanor had said, her smile not reaching her cold blue eyes. "James didn't mention you were quite so urban. I suppose we can ask the maid to fetch you something to tame that situation." Alara had swallowed the insult, reminding herself that she was playing a role. She was posing as a humble nurse, hiding her identity as the CEO of NextGen Pharmaceuticals to ensure James loved her for herself, not her billions. But as they moved to the dining room, the test became a torture. Sarah was already there, seated to the right of James in the spot clearly meant for a wife. Blonde, willowy, and draped in cashmere, she looked at Alara as if she were a stain on the pristine tablecloth. "So, Alara," Sarah drawled, sipping her wine. "James tells us you work in healthcare. That's so noble. My aunt's housekeeper's daughter does that too. She changes bedpans, I believe." "I work in patient care management," Alara replied evenly, omitting that she managed the care of millions through her company's innovations. James said nothing. He just drank his wine, shrinking into his chair as his mother took over the interrogation. "We have a legacy to protect, Alara," Eleanor announced, cutting into her turkey with surgical precision. "The Wellingtons don't mix with uncertainty. Your background is obscure, your family is unknown, and frankly, that engagement ring James bought you looks like something from a Cracker Jack box." "Actually, Mother thought it needed cleaning," James mumbled, finally speaking up, but instead of defending Alara, he took her hand, slid the modest gold band off her finger, and in a moment that shattered Alara's heart, handed it to Sarah to inspect. Sarah held it up to the light and laughed. "Oh, Jimmy, it's adorable. So quaint." Eleanor leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that carried across the room. "Let's be honest, dear. You are clearly here for the money. You want to dilute our bloodline with your struggles. But mark my words, you will never be one of us." The memory shattered as a real voice cut through the hospital air, not the doctor, but Marcus, her assistant, whispering through her earpiece. "The acquisition papers are ready, boss. Just give the word." The baby's first cry was the most beautiful sound Alara had ever heard, but it was immediately drowned out by the clicking of high heels on the hospital floor. She pulled her newborn son, Leo, closer to her chest, instinctively shielding him from the sudden intrusion. The morning light was just beginning to struggle through the heavy gray clouds outside, casting long, cold shadows across the recovery room. The door had swung open without a knock. There were no balloons, no flowers, and certainly no warm smiles. Instead, Eleanor swept in, wrapped in a fur coat that smelled of cold air and expensive perfume, followed closely by James and Sarah. James refused to make eye contact, staring fixedly at the linoleum floor, reeking of the stale champagne from the toast Alara had seen in the photo. But it was Sarah who walked straight to the bedside, her eyes scanning Alara's exhausted face with triumphant pity. "So this is it?" Sarah asked, peering into the bundle in Alara's arms. She wrinkled her nose slightly, as if inspecting a piece of discount merchandise. "Well, at least he's not too dark. We can probably fix his hair with the right treatments before the christening photos. We can't have him looking wild." Alara felt a surge of nausea that had nothing to do with labor. "Don't touch him," she hissed, tightening her grip on Leo. James finally stepped forward, but he stayed behind the barrier of his mother's fur coat. He tossed a thick manila envelope onto the bed, next to Alara's legs. It landed with a heavy thud that woke the baby, causing Leo to whimper. "Just sign it, Alara," James said, his voice sounding hollow and rehearsed. "Mother is right. We need a fresh start. Sarah and we understand each other. We belong to the same world." "A world where you abandon your wife in a blizzard?" Alara asked, looking at the man she had once adored. Eleanor stepped in, her voice crisp and businesslike. "Let's not be emotional. We have a generous offer. You sign the divorce papers, giving full custody of the child to James. In exchange, we will give you $5,000 to help you relocate somewhere more suitable for your kind." She gestured vaguely, dismissing Alara's entire existence. "The boy is a Wellington by blood. We will raise him properly, away from your influence, your poverty, and your cultural baggage. You want to buy my son for $5,000? Alara whispered, disbelief warring with the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "It's more than you're worth," Sarah smirked, resting her hand on James's shoulder. As she moved, The hospital lights caught the flash of a ring on her finger. It wasn't a new ring. It was a vintage gold band with a distinct filigree pattern, the very engagement ring James had taken from Alara months ago to get cleaned. The weapon Marcus had prepared, the acquisition papers, the debt notes, flashed in Alara's mind. She had hesitated to use them, hoping for a shred of humanity from James. But seeing her stolen ring on the finger of the woman mocking her son's skin color severed the last thread of her patience. Alara's tears stopped instantly. She looked at the ring on Sarah's finger, her missing ring, and her voice dropped an octave, cold as ice. "You want me to sign? Hand me my phone." Alara is done crying, and it's time for action. If you are still watching and find this story valuable, please comment the number 8 below to let me know you're standing with her. And if you haven't already, I strongly recommend you subscribe to the Black King channel and turn on the bell so you don't miss the moment justice is served. Your support helps us continue creating great content to inform and inspire you. Now, let's continue to the payback. Calling for a ride to the shelter? Eleanor sneered, checking her diamond watch, completely unaware that the timer on her own lavish lifestyle had just run out. She adjusted her fur coat, looking at Alara with a mixture of pity and disgust. "Do make it quick. We have a celebratory lunch reservations at the Ritz. Somewhere you certainly can't afford." Alara ignored her, her thumb hovering over the contact she had saved simply as Marcus A. She didn't look at James, who was already turning away, nor at Sarah, who was busy buffing the smudge off the stolen engagement ring. She tapped the screen and pressed the speaker icon. "Yes, Ms. Vance." Marcus's voice rang out, crisp, professional, and authoritative, a stark contrast to the chaos in the room. "Marcus," Alara said, her voice steady, shedding the tremble of the heartbroken wife. "Execute the acquisition of Wellington Industries. The debt is overdue." The room went deadly silent. James spun around, his face draining of color. "What did you say? How do you know about the company debt?" Before Alara could answer, Marcus's voice filled the small hospital room again. "Understood, boss. The $50 million loan you anonymously provided last year is now in default. I've already alerted the board. As per the contract, ownership of all Wellington assets, including the commercial holdings and the family estate, reverts to NextGen Pharmaceuticals effective immediately." "NextGen?" Eleanor gasped, clutching her pearls. "That's the conglomerate that saved us from bankruptcy. Our angel investor. What does this creature have to do with them?" Alara pushed herself up against the pillows, wincing slightly from the pain but sitting taller than she ever had in their presence. "I am Alara Vance," she declared, the name landing like a gavel strike. "Founder and CEO of NextGen Pharmaceuticals. I built a billion-dollar empire from scratch while you were busy judging the texture of my hair and the color of my skin." She looked directly at James, whose mouth was opening and closing like a fish. "I bought your debt anonymously because I loved you, James. I hid my identity because I wanted to know if you could love me without the billions. I wanted a husband, not a leech. But you just evicted your only lifeline." Eleanor stumbled back, hitting the wall. She looked from Alara to the cheap hospital gown, her brain failing to reconcile the image. "You? The help? Impossible. You drove a Honda. You lived in that apartment." "I lived below my means to find something real," Alara shot back. "And that angel investor you bragged about at your country club? The one you said was surely a visionary white man? That was me." Eleanor gasps, clutching her chest. "You? But you look like..." Alara cuts her off. "Like a billionaire, you couldn't see past your own prejudice." James took a step forward, his hands shaking. "Alara, honey, wait. If you own the debt, we can fix this. We're family. You signed the divorce papers, remember?" Alara pointed to the document on the bed. "You made it very clear I am not family." She watched the realization of total ruin wash over them. It was time for the final blow. The room fell silent, broken only by Alara turning her cold gaze to Sarah. "Speaking of fake appearances, let's talk about that ring you're so proud of." Sarah instinctively covered the sparkling stone on her finger, but there was nowhere to hide from the truth Alara was about to unleash. Alara let out a laugh, a sound devoid of humor but full of sharp, biting victory. "James told you it was a family heirloom, didn't he?" Alara asked, tilting her head. The truth is, he stole my engagement ring, a simple gold band, to give to you. But that monstrosity on your finger? He didn't get that from the Wellington vault. He bought it at a pawn shop down the street. It's cubic zirconia, worth $50 at best. Sarah gasped, looking down at her hand as if it were burning. She glared at James. Is that true? You told me this was your grandmother's. James stammered, sweating profusely. I was going to replace it once the trust fund unlocked. There is no trust fund, Alara interrupted, turning her attention to Eleanor. And there is no home to go back to. The historic mansion you live in? The bank foreclosed on it this morning. My real estate division purchased the deed 10 minutes ago. You are currently trespassing on my property. You have 24 hours to vacate before I have the sheriff remove your belongings. Eleanor looked as if she had been slapped. Her knees buckled, and she grabbed the edge of the hospital bed for support. You can't do this. We are Wellingtons. You were Wellingtons, Alara corrected. Now you're just debtors. James, realizing his entire world was collapsing, fell to his knees beside the bed, trying to grab Alara's hand. She pulled it away as if his touch were toxic. Alara, please. We can work this out. I made a mistake. I was confused. The baby. We need to be a family for the baby. The baby you just tried to buy for $5,000? Alara asked, reaching into the folder James had thrown on the bed. She pulled out the divorce papers he had been so eager for her to sign. You wanted a divorce? You've got it. But you forgot to read the prenuptial agreement we signed. Specifically, the infidelity clause. Since I have proof of your affair with Sarah, receipts, photos, that fake ring, you get nothing. No alimony. No access to my fortune. You leave this marriage with exactly what you brought into it. Nothing. Desperation turned to madness in Eleanor's eyes. Seeing the money vanish, she lunged for the bassinet where Leo was sleeping. He's my grandson. He's the heir. You can't take him. Alara moved faster than pain should have allowed, stepping between the woman and her son. Her voice was lethal, low, and vibrating with power. He is a Vance. You lost the right to be his family when you called him a mistake. If you ever come near my son again, I will bury you under so many lawsuits your grandchildren will be paying legal fees. The door opened, and two burly security guards in dark suits stepped in, nodding respectfully to Alara. She signaled them with a flick of her wrist, looking at the three people who had tried to break her. Alara signaled the security team. Get them out of my sight. And ensure they don't forget their trash. 6 months later, the bitter Boston winter had melted into a glorious spring, and the silence of Alara's life was now filled with applause, not loneliness. The grand ballroom of the Four Seasons was bathed in golden light for the inaugural gala of the Leo Foundation. Alara stood at the center of the room, wearing a stunning crimson gown that commanded attention, no longer hiding, no longer pretending. As she mingled with the city's true elite, people who valued innovation over pedigree, whispers of the Wellingtons' fate drifted through the room like cautionary tales. A guest near the bar leaned in to his wife. Did you hear? The bank seized everything. I saw Eleanor working as a hostess at a diner in Southie. And James, no one will hire him. He's living in a basement rental. Sarah, the fraud, had fled town the moment her fake luxury goods business was exposed by the press. They had wanted Alara to disappear, but instead, they had erased themselves from high society. Alara stepped up to the microphone, and the room fell into a respectful hush, a stark contrast to the cold dismissal she had faced in the delivery room. Marcus stood in the front row, holding baby Leo, who was cooing happily, surrounded by love rather than judgment. A year ago, Alara began, her voice warm but resonant. I was told I didn't fit the picture of a worthy family. I was judged by the texture of my hair and the coat on my back. They didn't know that dignity isn't something you wear. It's something you are. She looked down at her son, then back at the diverse sea of faces. Tonight, NextGen is launching a new grant for underprivileged mothers. We will ensure no woman has to give birth alone in a storm because she isn't wealthy enough or white enough to be cared for. The applause was deafening, tears shining in the eyes of many. Alara walked down the steps and took Leo into her arms, lifting him up not as a trophy, but as a promise. "This is my legacy," she whispered to the crowd. "Not money, but a world where he is judged by his character, not his complexion. We write our own value, and no one can edit that out." She hugged her son tight, feeling the warmth of a future she had built with her own hands and heart. Looking past the cameras, she offered a smile that was both a victory and an invitation. Kindness is the only currency that never devaluates.